Hello and welcome. This video is about a trip that we did in the summer of 2019 where we went to the Discovery Islands, which is an area east of Campbell River. For anyone who doesn't know it, Campbell River is on Vancouver Island on the east side, just about halfway up. Along the way we stopped at Poets Cove, Montague Harbour, Nanaimo Bay and Hornby Island before we ended up at Gorge Harbour and Manson's Landing. While we were there, we explored the area on the west side of Cortes Island, which included Shark's Bit, Marina Island, and the channels to the west of Cortes Island. On the way back, we stopped at Middlenatch Island, which was very interesting, and spent the night at Comox Harbour, and then going on to Nanaimo and Poets Cove to refuel before we headed back home. Here you can see our little marina, as well as some views straight across the Saanich Inlet to the west. To get in and out of Deep Cove Marina, you need the tides to be right so that you can clear the obstructions. So we left early the next morning to make sure we had enough depth under the keel. The run to Poets Cove is about 13 miles and usually takes a couple of hours. Poets Cove is a very popular spot on South Pender Island. You reach it from Swanson Channel. It's an easy approach and usually there's lots of space to anchor. Facilities at Poets Cove are great. There is a convenience store, as well as swimming pools and hot tubs. The upper pool is only for paying guests though. In the hotel, you'll find a couple of nice restaurants that serve pretty good food. The downstairs restaurant also has a bar and a patio. That afternoon, after having lunch at the restaurant at the hotel, we got back on the boat and headed the 12 miles north to Montague Harbour. There was a nice breeze blowing from the southwest, and we did the 12 miles in record time. Our next stop was Nanaimo Harbour, which is just north of Nanaimo. That meant going north against the current and through Dod Narrows. We arrived at Dod Narrows right at the slack, which is pretty much rush hour at the Narrows. There's not very much going on at Nanaimo Harbour in the way of facilities. You have to anchor on the south side because there's a Canadian naval base on the north side, so you're not allowed to go over there. We saw some seals and I got the fishing rod out. Only managed to catch a small shark though. Needless to say, we brought him aboard very carefully and then took the hook out and let him go right away. And then it was on to Tribune Bay. We had a good breeze blowing most of the day and the current was in our favor, so we made good time. We got there in the evening. Tribune Bay is a nice anchorage, lots of room for lots of boats. It's about 5 to 10 meters with very good holding. It's a bit exposed to the southeast, so if the wind is forecast from the southeast, maybe not the greatest place to be, but really one of the destinations that you want to go to in Georgia Strait. One of the reasons people mostly go to Tribune Bay is that it has a very nice sandy beach with lots of room for quite a few people. In the high season, I believe it gets super crowded, but when we were there in August, it was not too bad. There were quite a few people, but it was still, there was room to stretch out and pull up the dinghy and relax on the beach. We got to see a pretty unusual craft when we were there. It's an amphibious craft that I think is operated by a commercial operator. It basically drives all the way up onto the beach and then they load up people and they go back into the water. Interesting to watch the thing operate. It's not something you're going to see every day unless you go up here, I guess. We did take the dinghy and we went exploring over to the east side of the island. There's a bunch of small islands off that east side and there's a very narrow navigable channel that you can use to sort of cut the corner if you're heading north. Check the tide tables because it's not navigable for every boat and it's not navigable under all circumstances, so be careful. There's sea otters in the area as well as a lot of seabirds and you can watch boats going back and forth. On the way back we saw a bunch of kayakers in the main part of the bay, as well as a gigantic collection of seabirds. Not sure what they were doing, but they certainly seemed busy anyway. and on to Gorge Harbour. Entrance to Gorge Harbour is fairly narrow. Keep an eye on your charts, don't cut the corners, you'll be fine. It's a reasonable anchorage, but it can be a bit crowded in front of the marina. I believe over on the east side you can also find some anchorage with a bit more space. We left Gorge Harbour the same way, going out through the narrow entrance. Basically stay off to the right if there are oncoming boats, so you give them some room to pass. Out in Subtle Channel there really wasn't that much wind on that particular day, but we had a nice sail anyways. Ended up going just close to Whaletown, which is in that same area, and then headed over to Shark Spit, which is a great area to go wandering around on the beach and collecting shellfish and whatever you need. Uganda Passage I was quite concerned about when I first started planning this trip. The trick is to basically draw yourself an imaginary path that just keeps you in the middle of the channel that is formed by the red on your right and the green on your left, going north through the passage. Make a sharp turn around the first green and then go directly west, and then towards the northwest, and then directly west again. Pretty straightforward. Keep an eye on the depth sounder, it's fine. Going south through the passage, there's a number of isolated rocks on your port side as you go south. You'll usually see a bunch of seals sitting on the rocks enjoying the sunshine. Originally we weren't actually planning on spending much time at Shark Spit, but we enjoyed it so much that we did actually spend a fair amount of time there. There was a group of people there that I think had something to do with the race to Alaska, and their support boat was basically a gigantic pile of what appeared to be floating wreckage, but it kept floating and it seemed to be good. They had a bunch of races in the little channel just off Shark Spit that we were able to sit and watch from the boat. It was really an interesting time watching those guys go. Not sure exactly what they were up to, but they all seemed to be having a lot of fun, and we had a lot of fun talking to them. Another place we actually did spend time at that we hadn't really planned on was Manson's Landing. A really nice place to hang out with the dinghy. There's a little lagoon you can go to as well. It can be a bit tricky to anchor there if you want to get it exactly right. There's a bunch of permanent moorings that are scattered throughout that get in your way. And add that to the fact that the anchorage is actually quite deep in some of the areas that are open, and it's sort of 15 to 25 meters. So you do need a fair amount of road here. Patience and perseverance will definitely pay off. One of the places that we stopped at that was unexpectedly quite interesting was Mittelnatch Island. You approach from the east and you anchor in a very small bay with not very good holding, so go on a day when the weather's good. On the north of the bay you've got a big rock where sea lions hang out and yell at you from a distance of 50 yards. When you go ashore on the beach, you quite often will see harmless garter snakes wandering around the beach looking for fish or something. Just be careful you don't stand on them. And then walk up the beach, go to where one of the volunteers are, and talk to one of the volunteers. They'll explain everything that you need to know about the island. They'll show you where the trails are, and they'll tell you what kind of interesting plants and animals you can find there. Definitely worth visiting, definitely worth talking to the volunteers. You walk all the way over across the island to the west side, and you can find West Bay, which is a huge bay that faces out onto the Strait of Georgia with a really nice view towards Vancouver Island and the strait. Definitely worth a visit, definitely stop here if you have the time. Continuing our journey south, we spent the night at Comox Harbour. Lots of anchorage in the harbour right near the mooring fields, and a very busy marina with a nice fuel dock. So we refueled there and spent the night. We went ashore and looked at the parks, and were treated to some really nice sunsets across the harbour. In these next pictures we're looking towards the southwest or the west where the sun was setting. The anchorage is pretty easy, pretty good holding, and fairly well sheltered, so we spent a pretty comfortable night in the harbour. When you head south out of Comox going down Baines Sound, about a third of the way down Denman Island, you'll see the Denman Island ferry. What it is a cable ferry that runs between Vancouver Island and Denman Island. There are lights on the dock on shore, and you'll see either a red light or a green light. That'll tell you if you can actually cross where the cable goes. Don't be worried, they're not going to catch you by surprise. They're not going to suddenly turn it red while you're in the vicinity. You'll have lots of warnings, so just keep an eye on the lights as you approach and act accordingly. Our stop that night was Mark Bay, which is a very popular mooring spot just opposite Nanaimo. Mark Bay used to be an anchorage, but it's mooring only now. The mooring balls are marked with the length of the boat that can tie up to them, so check the mooring ball before you tie up to it. The balls themselves are pretty heavy and they don't have the chain that comes up through the center of the ball, so you have to tie onto it directly, and in heavy wind it can make it quite exciting to get a rope onto the ball and get it aboard the boat. While you're there, head ashore to Newcastle Island and go and look around. It's a pretty interesting place. There's nice parks and some little beaches and places to walk, so definitely worth going ashore, having a look around. At night you get some nice views of the city from Mark Bay. Our penultimate day, we left Mark Bay heading towards Poets Cove, which meant going back through Dardanelles again. We just caught the tail end of the ebb, which meant we were being helped by about a 1-knot current going southbound. Of course, from then it was all against the current until we got to Poets Cove. A trip ashore for a swim and a shower had everybody feeling a lot better. And finally, it was back to Deep Cove to put the boat away, clean everything up, and head home.